The Demon Lord unexpectedly discovered that his strongest magician seemed different. She thought he was mistaken. The moment she left, Ike suddenly collapsed to the ground, powerless, because his true identity was that of a human. Exposure in front of the Demon Lord would undoubtedly mean death. It turned out that Ike was once an orphan abandoned by humans, taken in by the greatest magician of the demon tribe, Romberg, who raised him as his own grandson. During this time, he passed on all his knowledge to Ike. Before Romberg died, he left behind a mask and a robe that could hide one's aura, admonishing Ike to never reveal his human identity to avoid fatal danger. As time swiftly passed, 10 years had gone by. The once little kid had now grown up to be a commander capable of leading thousands, thanks to his mastery of war tactics and exceptional magical abilities. With Ike's command, they even conquered a human city known for its impregnable defenses. Facing the stubborn resistance of the city lord, Ike merely used a simple spell to disorient him. Yet Ike's subsequent order was to treat their wounds, which puzzled the enemy. All of this was observed by his superior, Saphiro, the only person in the demon tribe who knew Ike's true identity. She was secretly pleased that recruiting Ike was the right decision, as she witnessed him capturing the strongest defended city with minimal forces. Meanwhile, Ike went to the city lord's room to rest and ensure privacy. Once he confirmed that no one was around, he released a powerful barrier. Despite his involvement in many wars, he still couldn't get used to the bloodshed. Every time he saw his human kin die, his guilt increased. Therefore, after achieving victory, he would immediately order his troops to treat the humans. And when alone, he always took off his mask as a reminder not to carelessly expose his identity. However, what he hadn't accounted for this time was a girl quietly hiding under the table who fainted from fear after bumping into something. Ike was devastated, unable to believe that the secret he had kept for 20 years could be exposed in such a manner. Before he could think further, his subordinates brought him a troubling issue. Ike's mercy had left too many humans alive in the city, which directly caused dissatisfaction among other officers. However, Ike had his own response ready. In this trade-centric city, the more humans there were, the more economic activity they could generate and the higher the taxes they could collect. But while communicating with the residents, a teleportation spell suddenly activated on Ike, and when he regained consciousness, he was in a dark place, attacked by a formidable magical puppet. It turned out this was Saphiro's latest creation, wanting Ike to test its power. After easily defeating the puppet, Saphiro brought up official matters. It appeared that the current Demon Lord, having heard of Ike's great achievements at the front, wanted to see for himself this capable young commander. Under Sephiroth's convenient teleportation magic, the two set off for the Demon Lord's castle. Meanwhile, the girl woke up from her faint, realizing she was locked inside a barrier. She was not surprised by this. After all, she knew Ike's secret. What she didn't expect was that Ike had even left a plate of dumplings for her. She decisively picked one up and ate it, finding it to be delicious. At the gates of the Demon Lord's castle, Ike and Saphiro had already arrived. To prevent Ike's human identity from being seen through, Saphiro quietly blew a breath of spiritual energy. The next second, the guards responsible for the inspection detected a strong magical aura on Ike, which completely dispelled any doubts about his identity. On the way to meet the Demon Lord, Ike couldn't help but recall various deeds about the Demon Lord. It was said that the current Demon Lord had overturned the demon's inability to defeat humans in just one battle, making her the strongest in demon history. She also had a unique insight into personnel, promoting even the lowest of soldiers if they showed potential, judging solely by ability. This innovative approach led the demon tribe to prosperity. The prospect of meeting such an epic-making Demon Lord even excited Ike a bit. However, what he didn't expect was that the Demon Lord looked nothing like he had imagined. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, the Demon Lord inevitably became suspicious of Ike's identity and questioned the reasons behind his actions after capturing the city. Fortunately, Ike was well prepared, articulating his philosophy smoothly, and with Saphiro occasionally interjecting, they managed to avert the crisis of his identity being exposed. Yet even with his watertight explanations, the Demon Lord instinctively sensed something was amiss. She came closer to Ike, claiming that next time she would definitely see Ike's true face, leaving a meaningful remark before departing. At this moment, Ike was sweating profusely. The close encounter with the demon lord had his heart racing, and she had even discovered that Ike's face was a mask. The only relief was that at least his identity had not been exposed this time. After the matters with the demon lord concluded, Ike immediately returned to his room to check on the girl. The food had been completely devoured, suggesting that the girl wasn't as stiff as he had imagined. When the girl saw Ike again, she was very panicked. Ike quickly assured her that he would not kill her, which immediately stopped her tears. After some conversation, it was learned that the girl's name was Sadie, who had become a maid for various reasons. To keep the secret from being exposed, Ike had no choice but to take Sadie as his own exclusive maid, establishing a contract that she must never reveal the secret for life. It is worth mentioning that after meeting with the demon lord, Ike received a reward from her, the recently conquered human town, and Ike was appointed as its new lord. However, Ike was not pleased, because this town was located on the southern border, which is essentially the front line of the human-demon wars, always at risk of human attacks. Gazing at the surrounding buildings in ruins, Ike had no choice but to order the residents to first rebuild the city walls. Otherwise, even with his extraordinary abilities, the human forces would easily breach them. However, relying solely on human power would take at least half a year. But Ike was not one to sit back idly. Not only did he have humans join in the construction work, but he also called upon the entire army to assist the humans with the physical labor. Seeing humans and demons working together, his lieutenant could hardly believe his eyes. What shocked him even more was that Ike had divided the humans and his subordinates into 3 groups, with each group working 8 hours a day. This arrangement ensured rest while allowing for continuous work 24 hours a day. Even more, to boost morale, Ike had set up a bonus system. Furthermore, when he saw that certain projects were particularly challenging for everyone, he would personally step in to resolve them. Such actions earned him the admiration of his subordinates, who believed he could definitely become the next demon lord. Ike unexpectedly discovered that after becoming the strongest mage among the demon race, he not only received the title of Lord from the Demon King, but also found his romantic fortunes ridiculously exaggerated. Normally, having 2 little fangirls clinging to him was tolerable, but he was especially surprised when he woke up in the boudoir of a beautiful superior. Since becoming the lord of the city, Ike found himself increasingly preoccupied with numerous matters, especially since his city was located at the border between humans and demons, always having to be prepared for human attacks. To gain the upper hand, Ike and his maid Sadie infiltrated a human town to secretly gather information about the human army. However, they were barely there before Sadie got distracted by a street vendor's game. It was a classic street scam where guessing the location of a bead could double one's bet. It seemed simple but was not easy at all, as the vendor would never let you guess correctly. At that moment, Sadie had no money. Just as the vendor was about to shoo her away, he noticed that Sadie seemed to have a nice figure, and suggested she could gamble with her body. As the vendor was about to lift the cup, unexpectedly, all the cups started floating in the air, and Sadie realized none of them contained the ball. Realizing the vendor was cheating, the crowd became furious and was about to resort to violence. After this minor incident, the two continued scouting for information. The demon race's power was growing stronger under the new Demon King, prompting many major nations to cease their infighting and form alliances against them. Unbeknownst to them, as Ike was preparing to return, the earlier vendor came with people, intending to capture Sati as his slave. Hearing this, Ike quickly surveyed the surroundings and, finding they were alone, subdued the vendor and his companion. Ike then inquired about the army. It turned out that the country's leaders wanted to strike Ike's city before forming an alliance. Back home, Ike quickly began devising countermeasures. Unexpectedly, his subordinates Lilith and Sadie began to get jealous of each other, each claiming to be closest to Ike, which only added to his headaches, as he couldn't focus on the pressing matters. Fortunately, his deputy arrived just in time to temporarily resolve their dispute. That very afternoon, a knight commander led his troops in preparation for a surprise attack. However, Ike had already prepared an ambush, positioning skeletons and orcs at optimum locations. Thus, before the human forces could even launch their attack, they were defeated with minimal losses by Ike's strategic planning. But what surprised Ike was that the leader of the opposing legion seemed formidable. Upon realizing they were ambushed, he immediately ordered a retreat. Such courage and decisiveness were not common among ordinary people. However, before his deputy could rejoice further, an arrow shot from behind accurately hit Ike. Although such damage wouldn't normally concern a typical demon, Ike's true identity was that of a human. He thought he was going to die, but when he woke up, he was astonished to find himself lying in bed, with his superior sleeping soundly beside him. It turned out that she rushed to heal his wounds right after he was injured. The details of the healing process went without saying. Looking at the arrow that hit him, Ike had two suspicions. Either an assassin had infiltrated the city beforehand, or there was a traitor among his subordinates. But he didn't have time to ponder it further, as the two women who had been worried about him rushed in. Because of Lilith's close contact, another argument ensued. Fortunately, his deputy arrived in time to report on important matters. According to his investigation, the Knight Commander Alistair, who had previously planned to attack them, had been imprisoned due to the failure of the siege. To verify his suspicions, Ike decided to meet Alistair in person. Unexpectedly, Lilith secretly followed along. With no other choice, Ike agreed to act together. However, with Lilith's participation, Ike's original plan for a stealthy infiltration turned into a direct assault, greatly improving their efficiency. While Lilith distracted the guards, Ike quickly found the room where Alistair was detained. As Ike had anticipated, Alistair was not simple at all. Far from being panicked, she immediately attacked Ike with a small knife aiming for his vital parts. Unfortunately for her, Ike quickly subdued her to the ground. Seeing her true face as a woman, Ike, while somewhat admiring her, also asked Alistair if she had planted any assassins in the city. At this, Alistair counter-questioned Ike. "Are you really a demon?" Before Ike could respond, a large number of soldiers rushed in. Ike never expected that there would be a traitor within the Demon Lord's army. One who not only tried to assassinate him, but even aimed for the Demon Lord's head. To uncover the truth behind his assassination, Ike risked infiltrating a human prison just to find out the connection between the assassin and the White Rose Knight Order's commander, Alistair. Unexpectedly, he almost exposed his human identity, and was even held hostage by the opposition who ordered him not to move. Meanwhile, reinforcements arrived in the prison, but Ike remained calm. "If you say don't move, then I won't move," he declared, unaware that Ike was a magician who could control minds with his magic right where he stood. Time seemed to stand still for Alistair as everyone's senses dulled under the magic. Then, Ike collapsed the floor beneath them. As soldiers fell from the height, Ike quickly saved them. Alistair, unable to grasp Ike's motives and unaware of the floor breaking beneath his own feet, found himself being princess carried by Ike after a leap, blushing intensely for a fraction of a second before hastily breaking free to question Ike's intentions. Ike revealed his identity as the commander of the 7th Legion of the Undead of the Demon Lord's army. Only then did Alistair realize he was the legendary commander of the Demon Lord's forces. Considering the question of whether Ike was human, being part of the Demon Lord's army, it was naturally impossible for him to be human. His purpose here was to find out if Alistair had arranged the previous assassination attempt. Alistair, a Kingdom Knight, was reluctant to speak more with Ike, who unexpectedly pinned him against the wall. Activating his mind-reading ability, Ike saw all her thoughts clearly. Lilith, witnessing this scene, became extremely jealous, willing to offer herself while Ike was out flirting. She demanded that Ike pin her against the wall instead. Ike, at a loss for words with Lilith, decided to leave. However, Alistair stopped him, asking if his visit was just to mock her, a defeated warrior. Ike denied ever engaging in such trivial acts, especially since she was unrelated to the assassination attempt. His mind reading had already revealed her integrity. He kindly reminded her not to worry about this defeat, but to focus more on strategies for after a loss. After saying this, he planned to return directly. Lilith, unwilling to let it go, suggested they go rest at an inn instead. Ike, being straightforward, thought of resting at home in bed, unaware that Lilith was hinting at discussing a 2 billion project. Unfortunately, Ike didn't want to expose his identity because of this. Returning home, he even brought back a special product from the capital, the rice produced there. Due to the Demon Lord's strict order to double the tax revenue of the city, Ike, the agricultural city known for its fertile land, was primarily producing wheat. By switching to rice, production could be increased several times. This change would also allow more humans to be freed from farming and try other industries, thereby increasing the GDP per capita. Not only would everyone have enough to eat, but more taxes could be collected as well. Ike then analyzed the current intelligence and deduced that the assassin used arrows from the White Rose Knight Order, but Alistair was not involved. This indicated that the assassin was deliberately framing someone. Ultimately, he came to a conclusion he was reluctant to believe. There was a traitor within his own army. Consequently, he activated his mind-reading ability, and as expected, the results confirmed his suspicions. The traitor was the goblin right in front of him. Ike immediately sought out Saphiro, only to find her taking a bath and completely off guard, which Ike was accustomed to, but still decided to wait outside. Saphiro instantly knew Ike came because of the traitor, so she was not surprised at all, having anticipated this. The traitor leader, Jess, was highly intelligent and battle-hardened, thus necessitating Saphiro's decision on the next steps. Meanwhile, Jess was surprised to hear that Ike had visited Saphiro, not expecting him to have recovered from his injuries so quickly. His subordinate reported that the planted undercover agent had suddenly lost contact, prompting Jess to worry about being exposed and plan to gather forces to strike first. Unbeknownst to him, Ike had already reflected on his approach and knew he must be cautious in dealing with the traitor. Jess, seeing Ike alone, decided not to pretend anymore and confronted him directly, determined to make sure Ike couldn't escape. Seeing all his enemies gathered, Ike felt reassured. The next moment, an explosion sounded behind them, and turning back, they realized Saphiro had used a forbidden spell to indiscriminately attack the military camp. Ike's inner turmoil erupted as Saphiro wreaked havoc at will, despite having been instructed to minimize the attack level. However, Saphiro had no intention of showing mercy to the traitors, not even sparing an ant. Ike approached Jess from behind and gave him two options: surrender now or wait until he becomes a commander with no forces left and then surrender. Jess, however, didn't care about the lives of his subordinates and used them to buy time for himself to escape through a secret tunnel, thankful that he had prepared it in advance. But the war had just begun. Unexpectedly, Ike quickly found him. Jess couldn't imagine that Ike had placed a familiar on him. However, Jess still had no intention of surrendering. He was, after all, the vice commander of the Legion. It was a pity that over the years, he had focused solely on scheming and his own combat strength had severely deteriorated. Finding himself restrained by binding magic, Jess changed his tactics and attempted to turn the tables. Ike, truly the right-hand man of the Demon Lord's army, possessed overwhelming magical power and a keen intellect. Jess hoped to ally with Ike to seize control of the Demon Lord's army. After all, the war between humans and demons had lasted many years, and it was the demons' role to oppress and torment the humans for entertainment. But the current Demon Lord did not allow senseless killing. There were not a few in the Demon Lord's army who harbored dissatisfaction. Saphiro, whether due to a lack of ambition or insufficient power, seemed to have no plans to rise to power himself. If they teamed up, they could definitely change the Demon Lord's army. He invited Ike to join their faction. Ike immediately refused without hesitation, and Jess was not surprised. He suddenly broke free from the magical restraints and swiftly pulled out a throwing knife from his chest, hurling it towards Ike. Ike was disappointed by his tactics, and his words also revealed that there were others behind him. Saphiro suddenly appeared, demanding Jess to confess. If he refused, severe torture awaited him. But before Saphiro could act, Jess was struck by a potent poison that even antidote magic couldn't cure. Ike was furious that someone would poison and kill a partner so despicably. Saphiro hoped he would see the reality that he had already been abandoned by his associates, and there was no need to continue selling favors. As long as he revealed the real mastermind behind the scenes, she could also help him seek revenge. Although being a traitor deserved no good end, seeing Jess so abruptly cut off was still lamentable. Ike thought that feeling pity for Jess showed he was still human at heart, which might become a stumbling block for him in the future. Later, they reported to the Demon Lord that the main conspirator seemed to be the Third Army commander, Pazdio, according to Jess's dying testimony. Pazdio had targeted not only them, but even the Demon Lord's head. After hearing this, the Demon Lord showed no emotion and wanted to hear what the headless knight Pazdio had to say. This man could never have imagined that his sexy female boss was completely indifferent to work. Instead, she was always daydreaming about him. If you tried to talk to her about work during her vacation, she would splash water in your face, inviting you to join her in the water. After the deputy commander of the 7th Legion was killed for his rebellion, Sephiro, accompanied by Ike, went to accuse the Demon Lord, claiming that the mastermind behind this was the commander of the 3rd Legion, Basteo. Unexpectedly, Basteo had already accused them first. He claimed that Sephiro and Ike had colluded to personally eliminate the deputy commander, framing her with groundless charges, presumably to use the Demon Lord to eliminate his own position, thus seizing her 3rd Legion. Upon hearing this, Sephiro was furious. How could he, as the commander of the 7th Legion, kill his own deputy? Although the Demon Lord had already seen through Basteo's ambitions, she did not overly criticize him. After all, demons are driven by ambition and desire. Without ambition, one does not deserve to be a demon. She also criticized Sephiro for not detecting the deputy commander's betrayal in time, which led to internal problems. Therefore, the Demon Lord believed both were at fault. According to military rules, both parties must be punished. However, considering the ongoing war between demons and humans, she did not want to lose 2 commanders at the same time. So, she let them duel, declaring that the victor represents the truth. This was the demon's way. Yet the duel was not to be a one-on-one challenge, but was to be fought using puppet soldiers. The commanders themselves could not enter the battlefield. The victor would decide the fate of the loser. Because proxies could be used in the duel, Sephiro surprisingly appointed Ike as the commander of this battle, which frightened Ike considerably. This clearly involved Sephiro's life, yet she entrusted her fate to Ike. Sephiro explained that in terms of commanding the battle, she indeed was not as capable as Ike. She entrusted her life to him. To not let Sephiro down, Ike began devising strategies overnight. Since the puppet soldiers had consistent abilities, the battle would test not only the commander's individual ability, but also the importance of their weapons. It was clearly unreasonable to only hold melee weapons like short swords or spears. Considering that victory required the elimination of 50 enemy skeleton soldiers, ranged attacks were most appropriate. They could shoot them all before they got close. However, such an obvious strategy would surely be anticipated by the opponent. Sadie suggested using crossbows, but Ike felt it was not enough. He needed a weapon that the opponent had never seen before, one that could achieve a fatal blow unguarded. Suddenly he thought of rifles. But could such a weapon truly be created in this other world? Remembering that Sephiro was the strongest alchemist here, Ike approached her with his proposal. But Sephiro was still indulging in comfort because she had previously enjoyed many of Ike's innovative creations, which were all made for her enjoyment of life. Now, being asked to work on something violent, Sephiro instantly felt lazy. With no other choice, Ike had to go back and figure things out himself. However, just as Ike finished taking a shower, the Demon Lord herself came to visit unexpectedly with a bag full of rifles. What shocked Ike even more was that the Demon Lord had known about his human identity from the beginning. It turned out that before his demonic grandfather passed away, he had told the Demon Lord about Ike's origins. Ike was speechless. If only his grandfather had mentioned this earlier, he wouldn't have been needlessly alarmed and wouldn't have had to hide his human identity in the demon army for 20 years. Still curious, Ike wondered why the Demon Lord would tolerate a human hiding among demons. The Demon Lord herself was resigned. To create the world she envisioned, she knew she couldn't rely solely on her own power and needed someone willing to fight for her. Believing Ike could provide significant help, she left him with no choice but to agree. When Ike told Sephiro about the Demon Lord's visit, Sephiro was also surprised, then turned her attention to studying the rifles. Considering there were no bullets, Sephiro created lead balls to substitute. Charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter were combined under Ike's arrangement by a succubus, thus creating gunpowder. Now all that was left was to repeatedly produce bullets and gunpowder, and the weapons were prepared. Soon, amidst the cheers of the demon soldiers, a 50 versus 50 puppet soldier match officially began. Seeing Ike's side all holding shields, Basteo scoffed, wondering if they intended to knock off his head with shields, especially since Sephiro herself didn't come, sending a subordinate instead. Perhaps she already knew she was going to lose and ran away early. Basteo was very proud of the sophisticated weapons on his puppet soldiers, gifted by the Demon Lord. Realizing this, Ike understood that the Demon Lord was impartial, fulfilling the needs of her subordinates as much as possible, using whoever was more talented. After the referee announced the start, The opposing archery team attacked first. Ike's soldiers had just raised their shields to block when they were ambushed by the enemy's melee troops. Within just 2.5 minutes, most of Ike's side were casualties. The enemy thought they were about to win, but suddenly, the sound of gunpowder-propelled bullets firing broke the silence of the night. Under Ike's command, the first wave of soldiers fired their guns and then retreated to the back to reload, while the soldiers from the back came forward to shoot. This continuous exchange left no gaps, and in just 1 minute, all the enemy soldiers were eliminated. Faced with such an outcome, Basteo couldn't believe it. The Demon Lord kindly gave him 2 choices: to end his own life with honor or to die by her hand. However, Basteo chose a third option, just in case he had again arranged for a sharpshooter to aim here. But what was effective as a surprise on Ike did not work on the Demon Lord. She caught the arrow, but upon closer inspection, the arrowhead carried a small charge of gunpowder, which then exploded, causing numerous casualties among the demons. It turned out that Basteo's real goal was to become the Demon Lord. This female boss who likes to tease her subordinates never expected that after a battle, Ike would actually be appointed by the Demon King as the commander of the 3rd Legion. From then on, she would be on an equal footing with him, directly under the Demon King. At this moment, her inexplicable possessiveness erupted. She didn't want to lose Ike, but Ike was also a subordinate of the Demon King. Before this, the 3rd Legion's commander Basteo, who lost to Ike, couldn't escape his fate of death. Thus, he rebelled, attempting to crown himself king. The soldiers present were unarmed and were caught off guard by the well-prepared 3rd Legion. The current Demon King was ambushed, and her fate was unknown. In this favorable situation, he also tried to win over Ike, a talented individual. But in Ike's eyes, he was just a despicable, defeated subordinate, and he did not regard his military strength highly. Facing the arrows of skeleton soldiers, Ike leapt up and released an explosive skill. However, things didn't seem so simple. Decapitating the demon had no effect, and not only did Basteo's body heal itself, but the soldiers also resurrected one after another. It turned out he was a headless knight, and his legion consisted entirely of the undead, whom ordinary damage could not kill. Facing the second wave of attacks, although Ike could easily break them one by one, he was ultimately human, and his magical power was limited. Even with archers secretly assassinating him, continuing this way would only lead to his endless exhaustion and death. Suddenly he thought of a good method. He used white magic, which made all undead exposed to it disappear like smoke. On the other side, his beautiful boss, Sephiro, also arrived in time. She led the legion from the outskirts into the battle. Ike's subordinates also arrived one after another, and in no time the situation drastically changed. Although the Demon King was ambushed, such damage could not hurt her. She hadn't appeared because she wanted to test Ike's strength. Seeing that Ike possessed the ability to duel with Basteo, she gave Basteo a chance, allowing him to duel with Ike, and if he won, he would be spared. Thus, their second duel began, a real battle of life and death. However, Basteo, after all, was a legion commander and still had some tricks up his sleeve. Ike was somewhat defeated by his fierce attacks. Basteo attempted to take advantage of his victory and shot a laser at Ike. In a moment of urgency, Ike summoned white magic specifically to counter the demon race. Sephiro was a bit surprised at when he had learned white magic, but the Demon King wasn't surprised at all. The scene shifts to Ike's childhood, where he was picked up by Romberg, who generously imparted all his knowledge and magic to Ike, reminding him to study diligently every day. Back then, Ike was also very eager to learn. When he saw flowers withering, he would ask if there was magic that could revive wilted flowers. Romberg patiently answered his questions, explaining that this belonged to the realm of white magic. However, for the demon race, this type of magic was extremely difficult to master because its essence stemmed from a heart filled with compassion, purity, and concern for others. For those who possessed magical power, white magic was more terrifying than any sword. Therefore, even though he learned white magic, Grandfather wouldn't allow him to display it easily in front of others. After dealing with the commander of the 3rd Legion, although it was somewhat unexpected, the outcome pleased Sephiro greatly. Ike knew that Sephiro was testing his growth, which is why she chose not to participate in the battle, but to cover him from the sidelines. However, for the Demon King, the Legion had suddenly lost a leader, and this vacancy needed to be filled. Ike was the natural choice. Thus, Sapphiro's dear subordinate was suddenly going to become someone who reported directly to the Demon King. An inexplicable possessiveness erupted in her heart. Although she had always vied with the Demon King, ultimately, it depended on Ike's decision. Ike did not want to become the commander of the 7th Legion. The residents of his domain were gradually getting used to the new town, and his subordinates were also getting accustomed to interacting with humans. Humans and demons cooperated to build the town together. When the residents lacked the strength to push carts, the demons would help. When the demons were tired and thirsty, the residents would bring them food and water. The town was peaceful, and he had made a promise when he became Sapphiro's apprentice to create a world where humans and demons coexisted. Now, he was progressing toward this goal. Therefore, he refused the Demon King. In exchange, he agreed to make Ivanelius the first town where demons and humans could coexist. The man never expected that, after finally making it to the position of deputy commander within the Demon Lord's army and seeing his territory prosper, the human kingdoms would choose this moment to unite. In just one night, they defeated the demons' strongest vanguard forces. Seeing that his own territory was the next target, Ike reluctantly brought out his ultimate secret weapon. If he could mass-produce rifles, even if thousands of troops came, they would have to retreat in defeat. However, given the alchemical skills of the demons, crafting such precise weapons was another story. Apart from replicating the appearance, firing one would likely blow up the barrel. This situation made Saphiro complain. Was making such weapons really necessary when magic could simply blast the enemies away? Ike was speechless. Saphiro's approach was just indiscriminate bombing, which just meant more mess for Ike to clean up in the end. Then, a succubus nearby had a great idea. By first manufacturing various metal and wooden parts, and then assembling them one by one, the quality of the rifles would greatly improve. But could such delicate parts really be made in another world? Ike immediately thought of the dwarves. If anyone, the skilled dwarven craftsman, could make any weapon possible. However, since the dwarves had lost to humans in the last war, their country was destroyed, and the craftsman had begun wandering the earth. Even if he could find them all, how would he make them comply? Suddenly, Ike had an idea. A dwarven king, Batson, was imprisoned in the human kingdom. If he could be rescued, he could surely manage the dwarven population. So without further ado, Ike sent Lilith and Jiren on a rescue mission. But Batson couldn't understand why the demons would save him. His incessant questioning irritated the succubus, who had no choice but to knock him out and carry him away. However, they didn't expect to be detected by human soldiers in less than 2.5 minutes. The soldiers tried to surround the succubus, not realizing they were the ones being surrounded. She decided to feast on these energetic big brothers. In less than a second, she drained the soldiers of their vitality, and they promptly fell asleep. Finally, with Ike's coordination, they escaped unharmed. When Batson woke up, Ike handed him a rifle and asked if he could replicate the weapon exactly. Although it was his first time seeing it, and the weapon seemed simple but intricate, Batson assured that with just 2.5 hours of study, he could definitely make it. But why should he help the demons? Although the demons had helped him escape prison, the thought of humans using the dwarves and then destroying their nation, leaving his people homeless, made him see demons and humans as no different. Batson firmly stated he would no longer help humans or demons. But Ike explained that this was for the peace between humans and demons. Under Ike's leadership, Batson witnessed a scene he could hardly believe. Humans and demons were actually living in harmony. But what did that have to do with him? He could not let go of his hatred for humans. What did their peace have to do with him? Ike said that if humans were at peace, then the dwarves could also live peacefully, couldn't they? Moreover, the demons could promise to help them rebuild their nation. But Batson was extremely angry. His people were gone, and he was alone. What was the point of re-establishing a dwarven nation then? While soothing his emotions, Ike took him to a new place. Inside, dwarves were eagerly hammering and forging weapons. Seeing this scene, Batson could hardly believe it. He hadn't expected that his long-lost relatives and friends were still alive. Upon learning that the demons had helped them, Batson finally softened his heart and decided to help Ike in realizing the wish for peace among the races. But beneath Ike's cold, skeletal face, the warmth of his palm was somewhat unbelievable to Batson. What he absolutely couldn't have imagined was that Ike was actually a human. Meanwhile, when the human side learned that Batson had been abducted, they appeared unruffled. What can that old man do now? They thought. At that moment, a soldier came to report that they had discovered the demon territory where Ike resided, which had merely 500 people, while the humans had a total force of 12,000. Confidently, the leader set out to attack the demon territory. The demoness boss could never have imagined that her male subordinate was actually an inventor. Not only did he manufacture rifles during an era dominated by melee weapons, but he also formed a remarkably powerful special forces team. Moreover, he developed fried rice, greatly satisfying the hunger of his troops. Prior to this, after the human race adopted the strategy of a king's alliance, they achieved victory after victory. They targeted the territory governed by Ike, and, after several days of observation, estimated that the demon soldiers under Ike would not exceed 5,000. Meanwhile, their 12 squads combined had a total of 12,000 troops. With such a disparity in numbers, the commander was brimming with confidence. On the other side, thanks to the tireless efforts of the dwarf race, they successfully manufactured a large number of rifles, some of which were already secretly being used by soldiers for practice. Under Jiren's guidance, everyone gradually became familiar with the rifles. With Sephiroth's help, their ammunition was also ready. The great battle was imminent. Ike summoned all the major officers for the final battle deployment. This time, their opponents were the Alliance Army of the Kings, possessing tens of thousands of soldiers. The 7th Legion, assembled by Ike here, had only about 2,000 soldiers. To bridge such a vast gap in troop strength, the strategy they needed to adopt was to strike fast and minimize our losses while demoralizing the enemy. Hence, they needed to fully exploit the superiority of their weapons, enticing the enemy to attack the city. At the peak of the enemy's morale, they would strike decisively. The more powerful an army, the more likely it is to fall apart when the tide turns against them. To boost the morale of the troops, food was a crucial aspect. The preparation of food had always been Satie's responsibility. Now, with so many additional people, they needed to prepare a food that was both filling and easy to make. After researching recipes, Ike found that fried rice was an excellent choice, especially since this year's harvest had been good. Satie, having briefly looked over the recipe, was confident. First, oil was heated in a pan. Then the prepared eggs were added, followed by pouring in the cooked rice and stir-frying it over high heat until golden brown. This simple cooking method produced deliciously aromatic food. It was the first time everyone had seen fried rice. Jiren and Lilith, attracted by the aroma, came over, and after tasting it, they praised it highly. Presumably, the soldiers below would also accept this food. A few days later, when the human army approached the city, Ike's side was already well prepared. The already arrogant human general, upon seeing the scale of the demon forces, which was even smaller than expected, became even more unrestrained. At the deputy commander's order, the army sounded the charge, and the trebuchets and crossbows in the rear began firing. Fortunately, Ike timely summoned a magical barrier, which the intense barrage couldn't penetrate. However, this defense was short-lived, as the human side also had magicians. As they continued their barrage, the human magicians weakened Ike's barrier, creating a breach in the defense. The human general then pressed the advantage. As the enemy nearly reached the city walls, the demons began throwing stones and shooting crossbow bolts. Despite heavy losses, the human soldiers' casualties were insufficient to make a significant difference due to the vast disparity in troop numbers. Capturing the town was merely a matter of time. However, the arrogant general couldn't wait any longer. He wanted to end the battle before dinner. Ignoring the welfare of his own troops, he ordered indiscriminate stone throwing and crossbow firing, coordinated with the magician's spells. Ike's barrier wall was instantly shattered, resulting in countless deaths and injuries among Ike's forces. Almost none of the first wave of human soldiers survived either. Ike hadn't anticipated such ruthlessness from the enemy, not even sparing their own. This also successfully enraged Ike, yet the human general showed no remorse and was even full of pride. Seeing the breach in the city walls, he then launched a second wave of assault. The battlefield shifted from a bombardment duel to a fierce melee.
The man had never imagined that, Despite having forces 10 times the size of the demons, he would still suffer a defeat. However, even as the war reached a stalemate, he had the leisure to drink tea, which was outrageous. As the decisive battle officially began, although the demons were individually stronger, the endless number of human soldiers proved overwhelming. At this moment, Jiran realized that using guns in close combat was inconvenient. Fearing that he might accidentally shoot a comrade, it was only when the werewolf troops joined the battle that they alleviated some pressure for the Demon King's army. Under the werewolves' attack, humans continuously fell. Jiran turned to lead an attack on a distant human squad that had come for support, finally managing to temporarily repel the humans. However, the werewolves had only been fighting for 10 minutes when the Demon King's army blew the horn for them to retreat. This was because Ike had proposed before the battle to end the war in the shortest time, and with the least casualties possible, if feasible. The demons were curious about how he planned to do this, yet unexpectedly, Ike hoped they would fight with all their might. Bayo felt slighted, thinking that Ike underestimated their willingness to slack off, but Fiorentina knew that Ike meant no such thing. He wanted to see how long Bayo could fight at full strength. Bayo conservatively estimated he could last an hour, but his troops might only manage half an hour or even less. Therefore, Ike only needed Bayo's troops to fight at full strength for 10 minutes, and they had to retreat no matter what after that time. Then it would be Gamos's turn to take the field. Bayo felt slighted again, sensing a lack of trust. Little did he know, Gamos had already understood Ike's intentions. This was like fixing a city gate using shifts. The longer the battle dragged on, the more it drained their strength. If the troops took turns confronting the enemy, they could confuse and exhaust the enemy's forces, allowing the Demon King's army to always be at their strongest. Meanwhile, the previously bombarded city wall was magically sealed again by Fiorentina's casual thorn magic. The current situation was progressing smoothly according to Ike's plan, but unexpectedly, the next moment, the giant troops again smashed a huge hole in the wall. Fiorentina didn't understand what he was trying to do. Even though the wall was breached again, their full force completely overwhelmed the humans. Gamos was eager to see what Ike would do next. At this moment, a human soldier nearly attacked Fiorentina. Fortunately, Jiran was quick to react and shot the opponent dead. Bayo had expressed doubts beforehand, saying that even if they took turns fighting, it was impossible to defeat everyone. Therefore, it was necessary for the alchemy and shooting squads to take action. They would serve as bait to draw in the enemy and reduce the attack range, intentionally exposing a vulnerability. Ike's orders were the same as those of Legion Commander Safiro. Even if it meant sacrificing his own life, Fiorentina was willing to do so, but Ike strictly forbade it. Absolutely no reckless sacrifices were allowed. He hoped everyone would control their subordinates and strictly adhere to this. The strategy this time was to fight quickly and decisively to reduce casualties on their side. Back to the present battlefield, the next wave of human catapults was ready. But before humans could launch again, they were suddenly smashed to pieces by falling rocks. The Demon King's army controlled the airspace and kept bombarding the ground with rocks because Ike had previously arranged for Kushana's troops to act as guerrillas, using long-range weapons to destroy the enemy's catapults and other weaponry. He had already sent scouts and learned that the enemy's forces were 10 times their size. Although the human general came from a historically noble family, he was actually a worthless coward, only concerned about his personal reputation and safety. Therefore, the best strategy was to capture the king first. As long as everyone's actions could influence the battle, the opponent would surely react. Ike would be responsible for capturing him. Bayo didn't understand why they shouldn't just kill him, but unexpectedly, Ike ordered others not to act independently. Seeing Ike's firm attitude, the officers had no choice but to agree to focus on their own tasks. Furthermore, Safiro would also join the battle, but was sent by Ike to perform another task, to single-handedly hold back the enemy's rear forces. Safiro complained verbally about being bossed around by Ike, but he was secretly delighted at the prospect of hunting the prey in front of him.
At this moment, human soldiers entering the town didn't understand why, despite their numerical superiority, they couldn't suppress the demons. Soon, the second and third squads were completely wiped out. The adjutant, concerned for the commander's safety, suggested he retreat. But unexpectedly, the commander, having lost his senses, demanded a full attack. If they couldn't even take down a small city, where would he put his face? To boost morale, he also joined the battle. Looking at the high-spirited human soldiers below the city walls, even Jiren was amazed. Are they not afraid at all? This would go on endlessly. But just as the human army was about to launch a full attack, the ground suddenly shook violently, tearing open a rift that divided the battlefield. The human soldiers hoped the magic troops would act, not knowing that Ike had already captured all the human magicians. The incompetent commander fell off his horse, and then Ike suddenly appeared in front of him, demanding he take responsibility for the casualties of the Demon King's army, and threatening that killing him would end the war. But if he retreated immediately, Ike was willing to spare his life. Unexpectedly, the Dwarf King suddenly burst out from behind the commander and struck with an axe, seeking justice for his fallen kin. Ike immediately intervened to stop the Dwarf King. Seeing the magical chains about to break, the little mustached man became frightened and started begging for mercy, not wanting to die. He then immediately ordered a retreat. The soldiers were dumbfounded. How could they be ordered to retreat just as they had begun their charge? Watching the humans continue to recede, the Dwarf King reminded Ike that the enemy would surely return. Ike might one day regret today's decision, he warned. However, Ike was unconcerned, confident that the Demon King's army would only grow stronger in time. At the moment, the entire town was immersed in the immense joy of their victory against the odds. Right in the palace, Jiren couldn't help but cling to Ike, a true testament to his unwavering fandom. Soon after, Lilith and Sati arrived, equally eager to prove their mettle. The officers all admired Sephiroth's foresight in choosing Ike as the vice captain, giving each of them a chance to showcase their abilities. Perhaps even without them, Ike could have won the battle, but Ike had always said that it was the trust in his reliable companions that made their unconventional tactics work. He said, "The war was over the moment it began." Everyone was relieved that although Ike might be fearsome, there was no one more dependable to have as a partner.